Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Our OP's job causes him to deal with Karens on a regular basis, so he happened to write a story about this very familiar character. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Entitled Homeowner says tree expert is wrong. I do vegetation management for power companies. Basically, this means that I trim and remove trees so that the power lines stay clear. As a result, I have to deal with trees in yards. Each power company has their own spec that we have to meet. I've worked in this industry for nearly 6 years now. One of the first things we need to learn, other than safe saw operation, is tree species identification. At the time of this story, I've worked there for about 3 years. It was during the middle of February in a cold climate. We'd stopped at this house where the tree in the yard was just inches away from the power line. We consider these hazard trees. The tree was a willow. Willows are fast-growing trees, and since it was February, it had no leaves on it, and we figured it would contact the phase when it leafed out. We talked to the lady, the Karen of the story, and told her what we needed to do. We were trimming for a power cooperative. Let's call this power company PCA. She was mad at us because she did not get her power from PCA. She told to tell our boss to bury the line. I had politely explained to her that we're just contracted by PCA and that getting the line buried was something she needed to work out with them. After a little bit, we talked her into doing the work after highlighting the dangers of having the tree that close to the line. We then go set up to get the chipper in place and start trimming. Karen comes running out of the house and starts screaming at me, "What are you doing, trimming this tree in the dead of winter? You're supposed to wait until summer. You're going to kill it." The best time to trim trees is when they're dormant. I explained to her that we needed to trim the tree now because if it leafed out, it could make contact with the line. At this point, she decided to yell at me for other trees that have died and been removed in the past. I walk with her to her front yard, keeping her distracted and away from my coworker who was trimming the tree. She then starts yelling at me for how the willows in the front yard look because we keep marking it flat. I told her that this was not our line, that it was Power Company B, a for-profit in the area. I told her that PCB had a different policy on trimming trees and that it doesn't have any effect on what we do. After this, I'm able to convince her that her tree will be just fine, and she goes into the house. After about 15 minutes, my coworker takes off a full lead from the tree. I'm able to reach it from the ground, so I grab my saw and slice off the stub left. It was about 3 feet long and 4 inches across. Karen then storms back out of the house and yells that was uncalled for. I said more, then asked, "You wanted that left there? It would have been an eyesore." She yells more about how we're killing the tree. I assure her that willows are extremely resilient. I told her we could cut it to the ground and it'd grow back in 10 years. It's hard to kill a willow if you want to. Now she's going on a verbal rampage and becoming very rude and personally attacking us, telling us we cut enough and that she's lived here for 40 years and we don't have a right to do it. I was as polite as I could be with her. We told her we have to get 10 feet, and if she didn't stop, I was going to get a tape measure out, and we would take exactly 10 feet and leave it look like whatever it will. After this, she turns and takes 2 steps for her door, turns back to me and says, "Oh, it's not a willow tree, it's a planted tree." Then storms back into the house. I looked up at my coworker and asked him, "What's a planted tree?" He just started laughing at the absurdity of what she said. And our second story. Paying rent without a fee. When we first moved to our apartment, a question came up about how we want to pay rent. They had a website with 2 choices, pay by card or pay by bank withdrawal. I picked pay by card, and after I filled out all my information online, on the last page it said they'd be charging me a convenience fee of about $10 for doing this automatically. I then tried again for pay by bank withdrawal, filled out all the information, and once again got hit with a $10 convenience fee. I thought that was annoying as I didn't want to keep paying an extra $10 every month for rent. The convenience is of them automatically taking the money instead of me manually writing up a check and giving it to them. So I looked up their address, went to my bank's bill pay page, and scheduled a recurring payment to that address every month. I ended up saving $10 every month for free. The inconvenience was passed to the apartment managers, who now have to open the mail and get my check every month. After a while of living there, I talked with the new neighbors who complained about having to pay this extra $10 all the time. I told them about this trick of paying automatically through the bank. Made them happy. You don't want to have such a company with authorization to reach into your bank account, like in any case, they don't stop it in time when you move out. And our next story. Neighbor blasted Aerosmith. I took her electricity, money, and food away. I lived in an apartment building for a couple of years. This building was a part of a larger condo association. There are townhomes and some building with apartments, all of which you could own. I rented from a landlord. The building I was in had 2 one-bedroom apartments in the front, about 900 square feet, and 2 two-bedroom apartments in the back, about 1,200 square feet. This was repeated for 3 floors, so 12 apartments in total. I had one of the one-bedrooms on the first floor where it was me, a 23-year-old male at the time, and my dog. The tenants were a mix of older folks and younger professionals like myself. There was one middle-aged alcoholic woman who was just a pain in everyone's butt. About a week after I had moved in, it was about 1 a.m., and suddenly, over the sound of my own TV, I hear Aerosmith blasting. After a quick process of elimination, I determine it's the drunk upstairs. I walk upstairs, not wanting to piss anyone off, decide to politely knock on the door and ask her to turn it down. After knocking a couple times, there's no answer. I retreat back to my apartment, throw some headphones in, and go to sleep. The next day, upon returning from work, I decide to go knock on the door to see if she's home. She answers, and I politely ask her to try to keep the music down after 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday. Don't worry about Friday or Saturday, because I'll be out or hammered and it won't matter. Over the course of the next few weeks, everything goes smoothly. Some other neighbors warn me that it'll happen again, and she's been like this since she moved in. I say, shame on them for never trying to do anything about it. They say, you'll see. Sure enough, a couple nights later, Aerosmith blasting at 3 a.m. I go up and knock on the door. She answers the door, clearly hammered, and calls me an a-hole and shuts the door. I go back downstairs and call the cops. Cops arrive, she's rude to them, and they do nothing but give her a warning. They leave and she turns the music back up. They come back and only another warning. This happens a handful of times after this, and I finally accept defeat. The cops can't or won't help. A few days after this, I hear her in the shower. Her bathroom's right above me. The light bulb goes off in my head, and I hurry to the basement where there's some storage areas for all tenants and look for a hot water disconnect. I determine my revenge will be turning her hot water off every time I hear her in the shower above. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the hot water disconnect. I do find another treasure, though, hidden in a small area behind one of the storage units that you wouldn't even guess was there, a large breaker panel. I open it up and find breakers for the hallway and staircase lights, etc. But wait, there's a breaker for every individual apartment also. My plan's now set, and I walk back smirking to my apartment, waiting. Finally, my day has arrived. I wake up at about 2 a.m. and hear Aerosmith. This time it's music to my ears, though. I grab a flashlight and hurry downstairs, find her apartment's breaker, and turn it off. I take my victory lap around the basement and walk back up to my apartment. I can hear stomping and screaming, but she can't figure out why her apartment's electricity isn't on, but the lights in the hallway are. I hear her knock on the neighbors' doors, but no one has the answer. I smile and go back to sleep. The next day, I wake up and go turn her power back on. I was working from home that day, and as I sit at my table and return some emails, I see the electrical service guy arrive. From the bit of conversation I could eavesdrop on, it was clear that he had no idea what had happened and thought she was a little crazy. After he left, I saw her carry out all the food in her fridge that had gone bad. As months progressed, every so often she'd start blasting the music. I'd go downstairs, cut her power off, and turn it back on hours later. She never picked up on the correlation between her music and losing power somehow. Every time she called the electrical service guy, I'd turn the power back on before he arrived. She'd then be charged for the visit and lose money throwing out the contents of her fridge. This worked for 2 years, up until about a week before I moved and forgot to turn it back on one day, and there was a lock on the breaker box. And our last story. Living in the country. In essence, Ken and Karen decided they wanted a property in the bush as a weekend getaway. So they bought a small place that had been a hobby farm on 5 acres just down the road. They didn't want it as a farm, so Ken gets to mow 5 acres every weekend. It's important to note that this was right next door to a pre-existing dairy that had been there for years. Dairy cows need to be milked twice a day, every day, so a dairy runs 365 days a year, dawn to dusk. There's noise and mud, cow poo, calving, bulls and cows doing what needs to be done to make more cows. A dairy never stops. Yet, despite seeing this, Ken and Karen still bought their weekend getaway next door. Then they started to complain. First, it was yelling at the farmhands over the fence when the cows were being driven into the milking yard at dawn, then hostile letters, then trying to get all the other neighbors to agree with them. They were well and truly laughed at, then presenting an official letter to cease and desist in which they'd made up themselves. Finally, they tried to go legal, only to find no lawyer would touch the case, and the local council would not stop a rural business from operating legally in a rural area. Finally, Ken and Karen appear to have admitted defeat, and we no longer see them on the weekends. The grass has grown long, and there are for sale signs up. Good riddance. Like the idiots who buy a house near an airport and then complain about planes flying overhead. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.